There are retirees in Texas living on 20-acre spreads with solar panels humming, water tanks full, and monthly expenses that don't crack $900. No mortgage eating half their social security check. No utility company jacking rates every winter. Here's what nobody tells you. It's not about going primitive. It's financial engineering. Texas built a legal framework that rewards you for unplugging. Property tax codes that let you drop a $2,000 annual bill to under $100 if you keep 6 beehives. Rainwater harvesting laws that exempt all your equipment from sales tax. Counties where you can legally park an RV as your primary residence with 0 zoning restrictions. We're breaking down 10 locations where people are actually pulling this off. Desert towns where land costs less than a used Honda. Hill country spreads where hunting deer cuts your grocery bill in half. Each one has a different trade-off, but the same result: financial independence on a budget that sounds like a typo. Here are 10 Texas places where you can live off-grid for under $1,000 a month. Sierra Blanca. 20 acres, $260 a month, 0 down. That's the entry point in Sierra Blanca, and it's owner financing in a county where most Americans can't get a traditional mortgage but can scrape together a car payment. Hudspeth County sits in the high desert where West Texas bleeds into New Mexico, plateaus, mountain silhouettes, land so cheap it feels like a clerical error. The math is simple. Land payment is $260. Property taxes on raw land run $2 to $5 monthly. Water costs $35 for access to community pumps where you fill tanks. Solar maintenance and propane backup run $60. Food and household supplies land around $400. Total $882 with margin for emergencies. No zoning. You can legally live in an RV, a tiny house on wheels, a converted school bus, a shipping container with windows. The county doesn't care as long as you're paying your land installments and not setting fires. Water is the tension. Drilling a well costs $14,000 because you're punching through desert hardpan to hit an aquifer 300 feet down. That's incompatible with the budget, so everyone hauls. You drive to the community station, fill 1,500 to 3,000 gallons worth of tanks, drive back, pump into storage. It becomes part of your weekly rhythm. The desert out here is Chihuahuan, creosote, ocotillo, dust. Summer days push 110, winter nights drop to the teens. You need serious insulation or you'll spend half your solar capacity heating and cooling. Build smart with spray foam and reflective coating, and you stay at 75 degrees inside while the outside world melts. Terlingua. Terlingua is Sierra Blanca's independence with a social safety net made of other people who decided the grid was a scam. The Terlingua Ranch subdivision sprawls across 200,000 acres, managed by the Property Owners Association. You pay $224 annually for road maintenance and access to the Terlingua Ranch Lodge. The lodge is the genius move, a community hub with a pool, laundry facilities, a restaurant, and a water station. Having a place to do laundry and eat a burger once a week is the psychological difference between sustainable and crushing when you're living in a tiny cabin 40 miles from town. Land costs more than Hudspeth. 20 acres runs $9,200 to $24,900. With owner financing, you're looking at monthly payments in the $400 to $600 range. Higher than Sierra Blanca, but inside the budget if you're disciplined about food and fuel. Brewster County gets over 3,500 hours of sunshine yearly. Your solar panels will produce more energy here than almost anywhere else. The trade-off is heat. Summer temperatures don't just hit 100, they stay there for months. You need a power system that can run cooling without draining your battery bank overnight. Medical access is the variable. Alpine Hospital is 60 to 80 miles north. Many Terlingua residents carry Air-Evac insurance for trauma situations. Another $70 to $100 yearly, but out here it's actuarial common sense. The community is real. Weekly potlucks, informal radio nets for emergencies, a shared understanding that if someone's truck breaks down, you stop and help. The culture respects your privacy, but shows up with tools and water when you need it. Van Horn. Culberson County is where the desert starts climbing. Land around Van Horn sits at the base of the Guadalupe Mountains, which means you're trading flat earth monotony for actual topography. Foothills, rock outcroppings, elevation changes that create microclimates. A ridge catching prevailing wind can be 10 degrees cooler than the valley floor. Winter nights, though, are vicious. The elevation means you're exposed to systems rolling off the Rockies, and when it freezes hard. 11.3 acres here cost around $12,775, roughly $1,130 per acre. The Guadalupe Estates area is marketed to homesteaders with surveyed lots, no HOA fees, and minimal restrictions as long as you meet state septic requirements. No HOA oversight means you can design water and power systems without needing board approval. The soil is limestone, hard, white, alkaline limestone that plants hate. Traditional in-ground gardening is nearly impossible unless you import tons of topsoil and build raised beds. Expensive and labor-intensive. The smarter move is wicking beds, sub-irrigated planters using capillary action to pull water from a bottom reservoir. They're more efficient in arid climates and work in garbage soil because you're building your own growing medium inside the bed. Heating is the winter challenge. Few trees for firewood, and propane gets expensive running a furnace all day. Most people use wood-burning stoves for primary heat and high-efficiency propane heaters for backup. You can source wood from town or fallen timber in national forest areas, but it requires a truck and weekend spent cutting and stacking. Starlink changed Culberson County. Before satellite internet, living this far out meant you were retired with no connectivity needs or driving into Van Horn or El Paso daily for work. Now you can run a remote business from the base of a mountain range while watching pronghorn drift across your property. It's why monthly costs stay manageable. People generate income without commuting expense and time. The soil challenges and heating demands make Van Horn less forgiving than the basin counties, but the elevation and topography give you something those flat expanses can't. Visual interest and temperature variation that makes the extremes more bearable. Dryden. Terrell County has the lowest property taxes in Texas, $285 a year. The median, the effective rate is 0.67%, which means your annual tax bill equals what most people pay monthly for car insurance. For an off-grid retiree on fixed income, this is the most powerful tool for keeping the budget under $1,000. Every dollar not paid in taxes is a dollar for system upgrades, fuel, or emergency padding. The fiscal advantage comes from minimal public services. Terrell doesn't spend much on infrastructure because there isn't much to maintain. Population is sparse, terrain is rugged, county government operates on a shoestring. That might sound dystopian if you're used to paved roads and municipal water, but if you're planning self-sufficiency anyway, it's perfect. You're not paying for services you don't use. Land here is marketed in large parcels, 60 to 180 acres, at $600 to $900 per acre. These are hunting. Ranches, recreation tracks, legacy properties that families are selling because the kids moved to Dallas and don't want to manage remote land. With owner financing and decent down payment, you can structure deals, keeping monthly land costs around $350 to $450, leaving budget room for everything else. The terrain is the trade-off. Deep canyons, arroyos that flash flood during monsoon season, rocky soil making even driving a challenge. You need four-wheel drive with high clearance, good tires, full-size spare. During late summer rains, some roads become impassable for days. If you're not comfortable with that isolation and logistical complexity, Terrell County will break you. Sanderson is the main hub, small town with grocery, hardware, gas stations. For anything more substantial, you're making a 130-mile round trip to Fort Stockton, 2 hours each way, burning 15 to 20 gallons at $3 a pop. You learn to batch errands, buy in bulk, plan trips. Like military operations, it becomes second nature, but it's a real cost in time and money. The people who thrive in Terrell County see remoteness not as a problem, but as a feature. They want the low taxes, the silence, to be left alone, to build and experiment without neighbors complaining or inspectors showing up. It's Texas's version of the frontier, still existing because nobody else wants it. Marfa. Presidio County is where off-grid aesthetic overlaps with actual culture. Marfa, famous for art galleries, film festivals, $5 lattes, sits at the county's northern edge. While you're not living in Marfa proper, being within an hour's drive means you've got access to services and experiences that don't exist in Sierra Blanca. Good restaurants, a bookstore, a functioning hospital. For some people, that proximity is worth slightly higher land costs. Remote desert tracks on the periphery run under $20,000 for 20 20 acres, 400 to 1,000 per acre, competitive with Hudspeth but with better resource access. The terrain is classic Chihuahuan desert, creosote flats, distant mountains, skies so clear at night the Milky Way looks three-dimensional. Annual rainfall is under 10 inches, meaning rainwater catchment alone won't work as primary water source. You're hauling or drilling, same as the western counties. The clever move here is beekeeping. Texas law allows agricultural valuation for beekeeping on parcels as small as 5 acres. You need 6 hives for the first 5 acres, then 1 additional hive per 2.5 acres after that. Setup cost is maybe $1,000. Hives, protective gear, basic tools. Once your bees are registered with the appraisal district and you're producing token honey, your property gets assessed on agricultural productivity instead of market value. A tract normally carrying a $2,000 annual tax bill drops to under $100. It's the single best return on investment in the off-grid playbook. Desert pollinators are abundant, making beekeeping easier than expected. Mesquite, acacia, wildflowers provide forage, and bees are surprisingly low maintenance once hives are established. You're not running a commercial honey operation, you're qualifying for a tax break. Big difference. Gray water systems are the other Presidio trick. With so little rainfall, you can't waste any water entering your property. A gray water system captures runoff from sinks, showers, washing machines, filters it, and redirects it to a small garden. You're not drinking it, but you're using it to keep peppers, tomatoes, and squash alive, shaving $50 to $100 off monthly groceries. Over a year, that's $600 to $1,200. Significant margin in a tight budget. Marfa's culture also means higher concentration of people who understand and respect the off-grid model. You're not the weird hermit. You're just another person making a rational choice about energy and water. That social acceptance matters more than people realize, especially for retirees who don't want to explain their lifestyle every time they interact with locals. The Presidio Periphery gives you the financial advantages of the deep desert with access to civilization when you need it. The beekeeping path to agricultural valuation is accessible to anyone willing to manage a few hives, and the cultural proximity to Marfa provides a social buffer that pure isolation doesn't offer. Paducah. Paducah is where Texas off-grid living stops being desert survival and starts looking like actual homesteading. The rolling plains get 22 to 28 inches of rain yearly, enough that rainwater catchment becomes viable primary water source instead of supplement. The soil is deeper and more fertile than anything west of the Pecos, which means you can grow food without heroic engineering. It's a fundamentally different equation. Cost of living in Paducah is 10% below national average. Housing costs are 78% below average, which means even supplemental expenses, hardware from the local shop, vehicle repair, groceries from the town store are cheaper than tourist-heavy West Texas. That matters on a fixed budget. Every $5 saved on chicken feed or plywood is $5 not pulled from your emergency fund. Land here runs under $1,500 per acre. You can find ag and recreation tracts where the numbers work without creative financing. The soil is thick enough that traditional gardening is possible without raised beds or imported dirt. You can plant a quarter-acre garden, mulch it heavily, and produce enough vegetables to cut grocery spending by a third. Throw in a chicken coop for eggs, and you're looking at serious food self-sufficiency. Rainfall makes water storage simpler. A 2,000 square foot roof in Paducah can collect upwards of 28,000 gallons yearly. With properly designed catchment, gutters, first flush diverters, filtration, you've got enough water for drinking, cooking, bathing, and garden irrigation without ever hauling or drilling. Upfront cost is $3,000 to $5,000 for tanks and plumbing, but after that, your water is free. Compare that to the haul and store model in Hudspeth, where you're spending $35 to $50 monthly indefinitely. The rolling plains also have strong agricultural tradition, which means local culture understands and supports people working land. You're not an outsider doing something strange. You're a neighbor with a small operation. That translates to easier access to information, better deals on used equipment, and a social network that actually functions. When your well pump fails or your truck won't start, you've got people to call who will show up with tools and know-how. Winters are cold but manageable. Snow is rare, but ice storms happen. You need a heating system handling extended periods below freezing, usually a wood stove or propane heater with large tank. Summers are hot, but not Brewster County hot. You're looking at mid-90s instead of 110s, which makes massive difference in how much energy you need to stay comfortable. The productivity advantage in Paducah can't be overstated. When your land actively produces food and water instead of requiring you to import both, your monthly burn rate drops dramatically. The slightly higher land cost compared to the western desert is offset within a year by lower operating expenses. For someone planning to stay long-term, it's a better investment than the ultra-cheap parcels that leave you hauling water forever. Matador. Motley County is ranchland. Big sky, wide horizons, properties measured in sections rather than acres. The appeal isn't rock-bottom land prices, but the combination of affordability and resources. You can buy 40 acres with owner financing, keep monthly payment under $1,000 with 10 to 20% down, and then supplement your budget by hunting abundant wildlife. Deer, hog, and dove are everywhere. A single axis or white-tailed deer yields 40 to 60 pounds of meat, enough to feed one person for 2 months or a couple for a month. Add in a few hogs during the year, and you're looking at $100 to $150 monthly in grocery savings, which is the difference between tight and comfortable in a sub-$1,000 budget. Hunting isn't a hobby here, it's a food strategy. The town of Matador provides essential services critical for retirees, a pharmacy and walk-in clinic. That's more medical infrastructure than you'll find in most western counties, where the nearest pharmacy might be 60 miles away. For someone managing a chronic condition or just wanting peace of mind from having a doctor within 20 minutes, Motley County is a much safer bet than the deep desert. The land is part of the reddish prairies ecosystem, which supports a mix of grassland and brushy cover. That diversity creates better habitat for wildlife and makes the landscape more visually interesting than flat, monochrome desert basins. You're still remote, but it's a softer remoteness. The rolling plains feel more like the American frontier myth, open, expansive, but not hostile. Owner financing is common here because many properties are legacy ranches being broken up and sold. Sellers understand that most buyers aren't walking in with 6 figures in cash, so they're willing to structure deals that work on monthly payments. You need decent down payment, usually 10 to 20%, but after that you're looking at land payments in the $350 to $450 range, leaving enough budget room for everything else. The culture is hunting and ranching. If you're not interested in either, Motley County might feel socially isolating, but if you are, you'll find a community of people who understand land management, livestock, and the rhythms of rural life. They'll help you butcher a deer, lend you a tractor, or point you toward the best water source on your property. It's a functional, working community, not a retirement enclave. The wildlife resource in Motley County effectively functions as a natural grocery store. The meat you harvest isn't just protein, it's budget flexibility. That $150 a month you're not spending at the store becomes your repair fund, your fuel reserve, or your medical copay buffer. For retirees on fixed income, that flexibility is the difference between constant stress and comfortable sustainability. Crowell. Ford County is flat, West Texas flat, Panhandle flat, the kind of flat where you can watch your dog run away for 3 days. And that flatness, combined with prevailing wind patterns, makes it one of the best locations in Texas for a hybrid off-grid power system. Solar is standard, but here you can add a small wind turbine and have power generation at night or during overcast winter stretches when your panels are underproducing. Wind turbines aren't cheap. A small residential unit runs $3,000 to $6,000 installed, but they pay for themselves by reducing battery bank size you need. Instead of oversizing your solar array and batteries to cover nighttime usage, you let the turbine handle overnight loads. It's a more balanced system, less vulnerable to single point failures, and it smooths out seasonal variability that makes off-grid power tricky in the first place. The county doesn't enforce strict building codes in unincorporated areas as long as your septic system meets state health standards. That regulatory leniency extends to power systems, outbuildings, and water infrastructure. You can experiment, iterate, and upgrade without needing permits or inspections. For people who want to DIY their systems and learn through trial and error, it's liberating. Land prices are competitive with other rolling plains counties, $1,100 to $1,500 per acre for large tracts. The inventory is mostly farm and ranch properties, which means parcels are often 100 acres or more. Buying that much land pushes your monthly payment higher unless you've got substantial down payment, but per acre cost stays low, and once once you own it outright, your carrying costs drop to almost nothing. The hybrid power model is the differentiator. In western deserts, solar is so effective that adding wind feels redundant. In the rolling plains, the wind is consistent enough that it becomes a legitimate second-generation source. That redundancy is reassuring. If your panels get damaged in a hailstorm or your turbine needs repair, you're not completely offline. You've got backup built into the system architecture. The winters here are brutal, not in temperature. It's cold, but not Montana cold, but in wind chill. When a blue norther rolls through and the wind is gusting at 30 miles per hour, it doesn't matter that it's only 20 degrees outside. It feels like zero, and your heating system needs to keep up. Propane is common backup, but wood stoves are popular because wood is relatively cheap if you're willing to scavenge or buy from local suppliers. The wind resource in Ford County is what makes the economics work differently than other locations. You're not just adding a turbine for novelty, you're building genuine energy redundancy that reduces your capital costs elsewhere in the system. For someone who wants maximum power reliability without oversized solar arrays, Ford County offers a configuration that's hard to replicate anywhere else in the state. Rocksprings. Edwards County is expensive by off-grid standards. 20 to 50 acres start around $115,000, which translates to monthly land payments north of $400 even with owner financing. So why is it on this list? Because the land produces. It produces wildlife, water, shade, forage, and a climate that doesn't try to kill you 6 months out of the year. That productivity offsets higher cost by lowering your recurring expenses everywhere else. Rocksprings is the mohair capital of the world, which tells you something about the ecosystem. It's part of the Edwards Plateau, limestone hills covered in juniper, oak, and native grasses. The topography creates microclimates. Tree cover provides natural cooling, and the wildlife population is so dense that hunting isn't a matter of skill so much as patience. White-tailed deer, axis deer, exotic game, it's all here. And it's all edible. A single deer can eliminate your meat budget for weeks. Add in a chicken coop for eggs, and you've effectively zeroed out the protein and dairy portion of your grocery spending. That's $200 to $300 monthly in savings, enough to cover the higher land payment and still come out ahead. The math only works if you're willing to process your own game, which is labor intensive and requires a chest freezer, but for people serious about food self-sufficiency, it's a no-brainer. The oak cover is the hidden value. Heavy tree cover can reduce the cooling load on a cabin by 20 to 30% compared to open desert. Your solar panels still get plenty of sun because hill country isn't rainforest dense, but your living space stays naturally cooler, which means you're not running fans or AC as hard. Over the course of a summer, that's hundreds of kilowatt hours you're not pulling from your battery bank. Water is less of a crisis here. Annual rainfall is higher than the deserts, and limestone geology means aquifers are closer to the surface. Wells are more affordable to drill, 8 to 12,000 instead of 14 plus, and water quality is generally good. You can also run a rainwater catchment system as primary source and use the well as backup, which gives you redundancy without the cost of massive storage arrays. The culture is hunting and land management. If you're not into that, you'll feel out of place, but if you are, you'll find a community of people who respect the land, understand ecology, and can teach you how to read terrain for game movement or identify edible plants. It's a different knowledge base than the solar and water engineering focus of desert counties, but it's just as valuable. Stevens Ranch and Split Rock Ranch are popular off-grid areas, surveyed tracts with diverse topography and enough acreage that you're not staring at your neighbor's RV from your front porch. Prices vary wildly depending on access, water availability, and whether the tract has any improvements, but deals do exist if you're patient and willing to negotiate. The key insight with Edwards County is understanding total cost of ownership versus monthly payment. Yes, your land payment is higher, but when you're harvesting 5 deer a year and your cooling costs are 30% lower and your well water is clean and abundant, your total monthly spend can actually be lower than someone in Hudspeth County paying $260 for land but $400 for food because they can't grow anything and game is scarce. Bastrop. Bastrop County is the compromised location for people who want off-grid financial independence but aren't ready to live 60 miles from the nearest hospital. It's an hour from Austin, which means you've got access to world-class medical care, grocery stores with actual variety, and cultural amenities that don't exist in rural Texas. The trade-off is higher land prices, often upwards of $8,000 per acre, but the climate and regulations offset that cost in ways that matter for monthly budgeting. The county allows tiny houses as small as 320 square feet in rural residential zones. That's legal recognition that not everyone wants or needs a 3-bedroom house with a 2-car garage. For someone building an off-grid cabin or parking a tiny home on wheels, it means you're working within the system instead of trying to skirt it. You can get permits, you can connect to the grid if you want to later, and you're not gambling that the county won't change rules and force you to tear everything down. Bastrop gets 35 inches of rain yearly. A 2,000 square foot roof can collect over 35,000 gallons annually, which is more than enough for a single person or couple living conservatively. With properly designed rainwater harvesting, gutters, first flush diverters, particulate filters, UV sterilization, you never haul water and you never drill a well. Your water is free after upfront capital investment, which runs $3,000 to $6,000 depending on tank size and filtration complexity. Texas Property Code explicitly prevents HOAs from banning rainwater harvesting systems, and Texas Tax Code exempts all rainwater equipment and installation labor from sales tax. That 8% savings on a $5,000 system is $400, enough to cover a month's worth of food. These legal protections exist because the state recognizes water scarcity as an existential issue, and they're betting that decentralized catchment is part of the solution. The climate is milder than anywhere else on this list. Summer highs are in mid-90s instead of 100+. Winter lows rarely drop below freezing. That reduces energy load on both ends. You're not fighting extreme heat in July or extreme cold in January, which means your solar system can be smaller and your heating cooling costs are lower. It's not dramatic, but over the course of a year, it adds up to real money saved. The higher land cost is the barrier. $8,000 per acre means a 20-acre tract runs $160,000, which is a non-starter for someone trying to stay under $1,000 monthly unless they've got substantial cash for down payment. But 10 acres is legally viable here. Enough space for a cabin, garden, chicken coop, and privacy. 10 acres at $8,000 per acre is $80,000, and with 50% down, you can structure owner financing keeping your monthly land cost around $500. It's tight, but it's possible. The appeal is proximity to civilization without sacrificing autonomy. You're off-grid in terms of utilities, generating your own power, harvesting your own water, managing your own waste, but you're not off-grid in terms of access. When you need to see a specialist or buy equipment that only exists at a real hardware store, you're not burning an entire day and a tank of gas. You're 30 minutes out. Bastrop also has a culture that accepts alternative housing. Tiny homes, converted barns, shipping container houses. None of it raises eyebrows the way it might in traditional suburbs. That social acceptance makes the permitting process easier and reduces friction of dealing with local government. You're not fighting the system, you're working within a framework designed to accommodate exactly what you're trying to do. The Bastrop model is ideal for people who want the financial benefits of off-grid living, but aren't willing to trade away access to modern medical care and urban amenities. The land costs more upfront, but the operating costs are lower, the climate is easier, and the legal framework is more supportive. For someone with health concerns or family nearby, it's the only location on this list that makes sense. $1,000. That's not a dream budget or clickbait. It's what people are actually living on across Texas. From the Chihuahuan Desert to the rolling plains to the hill country, the locations are different, the trade-offs are real, but the underlying mechanism is the same. You stop renting your utilities from corporations and start owning your infrastructure outright. Solar panels instead of an electric bill, water tanks instead of a municipal line, septic instead of sewer, beehives instead of a property tax bill that climbs every year. Texas built a legal system that makes this possible because the state has always valued land ownership and self-sufficiency over centralized control. The tax codes, the water laws, the lack of building restrictions in unincorporated areas, it's all there, in writing, waiting for people willing to trade convenience for autonomy. The western counties give you lowest costs but harshest conditions. The plains give you productivity and milder weather. The hill country gives you resources and proximity. There's a version of this model for almost anyone. The people doing this aren't survivalists or extremists. They're retirees on fixed incomes who did the math and realized Social Security doesn't cover rent and utilities in a normal town, but can fund a comfortable life on 20 acres with no debt. They're remote workers who figured out that Starlink and solar panels cost less than rent in a city. They're families who wanted land and space, and the ability to teach their kids that independence isn't just a concept, it's a skill set. You haul water, you clean your solar panels, you check your battery levels and your propane tank and your septic system. That's the work, but the work buys you something most Americans don't have anymore. Certainty that your monthly expenses won't double because a utility decided to raise rates. Certainty that you're not one medical bill away from losing your house because you don't have a mortgage. Certainty that you can live on what you have without needing more every year just to stay in place. Texas is still big enough, still empty enough, that you can stake a claim and build a life that doesn't depend on systems you can't control. That's rare, and it's getting rarer, but for now, if you know where to look and you're willing to do the work, it's still there.